Chapter 1281. Just as the darkness was about to engulf Yi Chen's figure, an aura even more terrifying than the heavenless sword realm erupted from Yi Chen's body. As this aura erupted, time and space twisted and laws collapsed. Huge green lotuses were born one after another. The green lotuses bloomed, and sword chi shot into the sky. The cold aura made people's hair stand on end. The pitch-black heavenless sword realm seemed to have met its nemesis, shrinking all of a sudden. The white-bone sword emperor was dumbfounded. He murmured, "Late 8th level sword realm. Am I seeing things? Or am I getting old? Wasn't he only at the early 8th level 360 years ago?" In the past, the white-bone sword emperor would never have believed that anyone could raise 2 levels in 360 years. It would have been too far-fetched. But today, he had to believe that someone could do it, and he had witnessed it with his own eyes. The heavenless sword realm shrank fast, but the green lotus sword realm expanded even faster. When the two great sword realms collided, the entire Azura field was filled with the sound of metal clashing. The heavenless sword realm was like a black curtain that was cut into pieces by the green lotus sword realm. Apart from being of a higher level, the green lotus sword realm also had the help of sword yuan, making it incomparably sharp. Impossible! Yi Jianhuang's eyes were wide open. He tried his best to activate the sword realm, trying to stop the green lotus sword realm from expanding. Once the green lotus sword realm expanded, even if he had 100% of his power, he would be suppressed to 80%. The heavenless sword realm became stronger as it twisted into a huge black sword, piercing towards the incoming green lotus sword realm. Yi Chen smiled coldly. He raised his right index and middle fingers and lightly pointed out. Suddenly, a green lotus within the green lotus sword realm crashed into the black sword formed by the heavenless sword realm. Rumble! The black sword and the green lotus collapsed at the same time. However, the peerless sword within the green lotus seemed to have absorbed all of the lotus power. It charged into the heavenless sword realm, shooting everywhere. Dazzling sparks lit up half of the heavenless sword realm. Return! Making a prompt decision, Yi Jianhuang withdrew the heavenless sword realm to protect himself. At the same time, he pulled out a treasured sword shining with black light. The tip of the sword trembled, and thousands of sword flowers burst forth, attacking Yi Chen. Although the green lotus sword realm was powerful, it could not tear apart his heavenless sword realm. The only disadvantage was that his own strength would be suppressed by the green lotus sword realm. However, Yi Jianhuang did not care so much. He was very confident in his sword arts. Yi Chen did not want to take advantage of Yi Jianhuang. He immediately retracted his green lotus sword realm. They were both sword emperors, but one was a human and the other was a yiksha. Yi Chen would not be afraid. Moreover, he also wanted to see Yi Jianhuang's sword art. If possible, it would be best if he could absorb the essence of his sword art. Clang clang clang. The two sword arts were both top-notch below the supreme realm. The moment they clashed, the whole sky was filled with flickering sword lights. As the battle reached its climax, Yi Jianhuang's movement speed and sword speed doubled. Thousands upon thousands of Yi Jianhuang appeared, each of them looking extremely lifelike and lifelike. Seeing this, Yi Chen also formed thousands upon thousands of illusory figures, battling with Yi Jianhuang. The whole place was silent. A battle of this level was beyond their imagination. Fury of the masses! Suddenly, Yi Jianhuang performed an extremely frightening sword art. The black sword pointed at Yi Chen, and the yuan qi of the heaven and earth violently fluctuated. A formless will shrouded it, turning it into a peerless sharp light that shot towards Yi Chen. Being within the range of the opponent's sword aura, Yi Chen vaguely felt that he had become the villain, and was being targeted by all. What a great sword art! Yi Chen praised in his heart, but he didn't slow down. Boundless nature was performed, and countless bubbles danced in the air like a dream. The image of fury of the masses immediately merged into the bubbles, attacking Yi Jianhuang. Boundless nature was ever-changing, and the changes of the opponent's sword art were also within it. Heaven and earth slaughter. Seeing that the fury of the masses couldn't do anything to Yi Chen, Yi Jianhuang changed his sword aura, and performed the most tricky sword art. This sword art focused on one point, and its sword chi was oppressive. Apart from this, Yi Jianhuang no longer held back, merging the heart sword realm into his sword art, making the sword art even more powerful. Qi, qi, qi. The snake-like sword qi drilled in and out of space-time, slithering towards Yi Chun in an extremely slippery manner. Death slash. With a wave of the Sky Dream sword, Yi Chun unleashed a dense sword net of death. However, Yi Chun had underestimated Yi Jianhuang's ultimate move. The snake-like sword qi avoided the opponent's attack and attacked its weak points. Swaying left and right, it somehow passed through the sword net of death. Yin and yang, real and fake. So that's how it is. Yi Chun understood in his heart. The sword aura changed, changing from offense to defense. 5 elemental sword art would decline after reaching its peak. Yi Jianhuang sneered in his heart. Fool, the heaven and earth slaughter couldn't block it at all. Barbarian Emperor had the barbarian battle physique, and the heaven and earth slaughter couldn't kill him. You, a swordsman, could only die if you were hit. Unfortunately, Yi Jianhuang miscalculated immediately. The heaven and earth slaughter couldn't do anything to Yi Chen's 5 elemental sword art. The moment it entered the range of the 5 elemental sword art, its power dropped drastically. The ability to avoid the opponent's attack and attack its weak points was also pushed back again and again. In the end, it was cancelled out by the 5 elemental sword art and dissipated into nothingness. Yin and yang shift, real and false change. A portion of the essence of the heaven and earth slaughter appeared in Yi Chen's mind. With just this portion, Yi Chen had the confidence to create a sword art that wasn't inferior to the heaven and earth slaughter. Good. You are stronger than Barbarian Emperor, to be able to force me to use my heavenless great freedom sword art. But everything is over now. Yi Jianhuang's expression changed several times, but he soon calmed down. Vast, deep, free and unfettered. All kinds of sword aura burst forth from Yi Jianhuang's body. It was unknown when the arena had fallen into darkness. This kind of darkness wasn't the kind where one couldn't even see their fingers in front of them, but a kind of night that was between light and darkness. It was a little like dawn, but also a little like dusk. Heavenless great freedom sword art. I didn't expect him to have cultivated it to such a level. The 4-winged dragon emperor, who was ranked 5th on the quasi-venerable list, had a complicated expression. 500 years ago, Yi Jianhuang had fought with him. In that battle, Yi Jianhuang's strength was already not inferior to his. The 4-winged dragon emperor knew very well that it was because his own defense was strong enough, and Yi Jianhuang hadn't comprehended the heart sword realm. As a result, the heavenless great freedom sword art naturally couldn't do anything to him. After all, no matter how exquisite a sword art was, it had to be able to break through the defense. What a pity for a peerless genius of the human race. The 4-winged dragon emperor didn't need to look to know that Yi Chun was dead for sure. Among everyone present, only the celestial devil emperor and the evil sword emperor could withstand the heavenless great freedom sword art. The others would barely be able to withstand it. Even a martial emperor might not be able to do so. This wasn't an exaggeration by the 4-winged dragon emperor. After sparring with Yi Jianhuang, he deeply knew how terrifying the heavenless great freedom sword art was. There were only 2 ways to block it. One was to have a strong enough martial art that surpassed the heavenless great freedom sword art. The other was to have a strong enough defense. Chapter 1282. Such a powerful sword aura. Yi Chen wasn't surprised but happy instead. How could he not see that Yi Jianhuang's heaven-free great sword art contained many kinds of sword auras, and all of them were fused into one to form the heaven-free great sword aura. With such a powerful sword aura, the sword art's power would certainly not be weak. With a thought, the 5 elements sword art's sword aura spread out, like a huge 5-colored light sphere enveloping him, shining brightly in the dark night. Clang! Silently and without any warning, a blazing flame brushed past the barrier of the 5 elements sword technique, like a wandering dragon or snake, flowing 1,000 miles in one go. Clang, 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 clang. Next, the blazing flame almost enveloped the 5 elements sword art. The momentum was ferocious, and the sword aura was unimaginable. As for Yi Jianhuang, he seemed to have fused with the sword. The sword was him, and he was the sword. Man and sword became one, and the heart sword drove the sword light to the realm of invincibility. Yi Chen's eyes shone brighter and brighter. The heaven-free great sword art was indeed lawless. Although he could defend with the 5 elements sword art, he couldn't reduce the opponent's sword speed, and could only slightly weaken its power. What Yi Chen didn't know was that Yi Jianhuang was extremely shocked at this moment. His heaven-free great sword art had been cultivated to the realm of man, sword and heart as one, but he still couldn't break the opponent's sword art. How could this be? One should know that Barbarian Emperor's barbarian battle physique was like leather under his heaven-free great sword art. Explode! Yi Jianhuang's power erupted uncontrollably, and his heart sword realm was pushed to the limit. Along with the surging of his soul power, the three poured into the heaven-free great sword art at the same time, madly increasing the sword art's power. Rumble! A fiery light that spanned thousands of miles flashed past. At that moment, even space itself trembled and cracks appeared. Why? Yi Jianhuang was about to go crazy. The 5-colored light sphere was still safe and sound under the sword aura. The heaven-free great sword art didn't even have the qualifications to make it tremble. Number 1 defensive sword art in the world. The white bone sword monarch had to admit that this was the most powerful defensive sword art he had ever seen. He had heard of the heavenly boundless sword art of the Night Sword Monarch, and he had just witnessed it for himself. If it had been him, he wouldn't even have been able to withstand the fury of the masses and heaven and earth massacre, let alone the heavenly boundless sword art. From what he could tell, the heavenly boundless sword art was at least 10 times more powerful than the previous 2 sword arts, and it was no wonder that the Barbarian Emperor's barbarian battle body was as fragile as tofu. The black-white old man's face was gloomy. He was trying to put himself in Yi Jianhuang's shoes. Would he be able to break through Yi Chen's 5 elements sword art? The answer was no. This defensive sword art was too freakish, causing people to feel despair. Fortunately, up until now, Yi Chen hadn't displayed any offensive sword art that was comparable to a defensive sword art. Otherwise, he would have no choice but to forfeit. Celestial Devil Emperor, an evil sword emperor, revealed serious expressions for the first time as they carefully observed Yi Chen's 5 elements sword art. Their eyesight was much sharper than Yi Jianhuang's, and they could see more things. For them, there was no sword art in this world that they couldn't break. The only problem was whether they were strong enough. Yi Chen, do you only know how to defend? If you have the guts, then fight me head-on. Yi Jianhuang raged. Break my 5 elements sword art first. There's no point in talking anymore. Yi Chen wasn't afraid of facing Yi Jianhuang head-on, but it wasn't the right time yet. Every time Yi Jianhuang used the heavenly boundless sword art to attack him, he would be able to absorb a part of the sword art's essence. However, the essence of the heavenly boundless sword art was too much, and he needed a few more attacks to absorb it. Do you really think I can't break it? Break for me, break for me. Yi Jianhuang attacked Yi Chen in a frenzy, again and again. Unknowingly, a cup of tea's time had passed. Yi Jianhuang still couldn't break the 5 elements sword art. The current him hated Yi Chen to the bone. The latter had completely destroyed his confidence, dignity and momentum, crushing them into pieces. If he couldn't defeat Yi Chen today, he could forget about becoming a supreme being for the rest of his life, because Yi Chen had become his heart demon, shrouding his soul. Of course, the prerequisite was that he could leave the arena alive and leave the Azura world. I can't even bear to watch anymore. For the first time, White Bone Sword Emperor felt sorrow for Yi Jianhuang, a member of the Wuxia race. At the same time, he rejoiced that he was a member of the human race. Losing wasn't scary. What was scary was being beaten to the point where one had no confidence at all. A Wuxia race sword emperor, who originally had a bright future, had become like this. Just a little bit more. Yi Chen said inwardly. In the blink of an eye, another cup of tea's time had passed. Yi Jianhuang was on the verge of insanity. There was only one thought in his mind, and that was to leave this damned place. Yi Jianhuang is ruined. Celestial Demon Emperor shook his head, looking at Yi Jianhuang with a pitiful gaze. Other than us, if it was anyone else encountering such a defensive sword art, the chances of them collapsing would be very high. I can only say that Yi Jianhuang's luck was bad, but luck is also a part of strength. The current him is already a waste. It's not a pity for him to die. Evil Sword Emperor had an indifferent expression. To be able to drive Yi Jianhuang crazy, it seems like we need to be more serious. Celestial Demon Emperor chuckled, his eyes flashing with a sharp killing intent. Yi Chen, you gutless guy, keep defending if you have the ability. Yi Jianhuang wasn't as unbearable as these people thought. He was on the verge of collapse. He suddenly realized that Yi Chen's defense was so powerful. But his attack might not be that powerful. As long as Yi Chen gave up on defending, he would still have a chance. Even if Yi Chen kept on defending, he would at least maintain a stalemate. Why was he so impatient? Yi Jianhuang finally calmed down after waking up. Of course, if he didn't kill Yi Chen today, there would still be a heart demon, which would become the biggest obstacle for him to ascend to the supreme level. Alright, as you wish. The multicolored light sphere dissipated, and Yi Chen stopped performing the 5 elements sword art. Haha, there's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no gate to hell, but you still insist on coming. Die. Yi Jianhuang was stunned for a moment, then laughed out loud. He had been waiting for this moment. Should he say that Yi Chen was stupid or inflexible? Of course, it could also be that using this sword art consumed too much energy, but all of this wasn't important. What was important was that he would deal with Yi Chen with his own hands. Sai, why did you stop? The White Bone Sword Emperor slapped his thigh. Yi Chen wasn't in a hurry, but he was still a bit too young. The middle-aged martial emperor shook his head, a trace of worry in his eyes. Die. Yi Jianhuang knew that this was a rare opportunity, so he used almost all the strength he had in this life on the heavenless sword art. An invisible sword chi spanning thousands of miles slashed toward Yi Chen. This sword was his peak sword, and also his sure-kill sword. All of his essence, chi and spirit were integrated into this sword. Facing Yi Jianhuang's peak sword, Yi Chen's expression was emotionless. The heavenly dream sword moved smoothly and attacked. 1 petal, 2 petals, 3 petals, dozens of petals fluttered down from the sky. Each petal was so beautiful that the flow of time instantly stopped. The White Bone Sword Emperor was stunned. The 4-winged Dragon Emperor was stunned. Chapter 1283. My sword burial art only produced a few petals, but his actually produced dozens? The White Bone Sword Emperor knew very well how difficult it was to cultivate the sword burial art. Dozens and a few petals might seem 10 times different, but the difference in power was at least hundreds of times. When Supreme Burial Flower used the sword burial art, hundreds of petals fell. However, that was a sovereign, and the weakest sovereign was at least 100 times stronger than the strongest quasi-sovereign. Wait, how can he know the sword burial art? Suddenly, the White Bone Sword Emperor thought of the key point. Yi Chen hadn't used the sword burial art in the previous fights, so it was the White Bone Sword Emperor's first time seeing Yi Chen use it. He couldn't react for a moment. Did he learn the essence of the sword burial art while fighting me? The White Bone Sword Emperor felt a chill run down his spine. Facing Yi Chen's sword burial art, Yi Jianhuang felt as if his soul was frozen. The Heart Sword Realm didn't have any effect. It should be pointed out that the one using the sword burial art was Yi Chen, not the White Bone Sword Emperor. Yi Chen's sword burial art could still freeze the Heart Sword Realm, unless Yi Jianhuang's Heart Sword Realm was much higher than Yi Chen's. Pfft! The night dissipated, and Yi Jianhuang's body dissipated with the wind. At this moment, the spectators finally understood that although Yi Chen didn't counterattack, it didn't mean that Yi Chen didn't have the strength to fight back. Yi Jianhuang had been living in a tragedy from start to finish. Freak lunatic. The 4-winged Dragon Emperor was dumbfounded. It took him a long time to recover. He had decided that once he met Yi Chen, he would directly forfeit. Such a freak should be left to the Celestial Demon Emperor and the Evil Sword Emperor. He didn't want to meet him. I'm old. I still want to live for a few more years. The black-white old man felt old for the first time. If the dead Lich Sovereign were to be resurrected, he probably wouldn't want to fight Yi Chen. Up until now, no one knew how much Yi Chen had revealed. At least, the black-white old man couldn't see through it. He didn't want to see it either, because he would have to pay a price. The fight continued, and the number of people in the spectator stands decreased. Perhaps in the end, there would only be 2 people left to fight. The White Bone Sword Emperor wasn't so lucky this time. He encountered the Heavenly Devil Sovereign, and without a doubt he chose to forfeit. After forfeiting 3 times, he lost the right to participate in the wrestling ring, and was sent out of the Azura world. Following that, the Green-Robed Emperor lost to the Golden Battle Emperor of the Giant Race, who was ranked 3rd on the quasi-venerable list. Yan Qingxian, on the other hand, encountered a martial emperor. Although Yan Qingxian was not weak, a martial emperor was too strong. Yan Qingxuan's defeat was understandable. Yi Chen, we will meet again. On the stage, facing Yi Chen, the Queen of God Bless Queen forfeited. At first, she thought that she had gradually caught up to Yi Chen, but when she saw Yi Chen again, reality told her that the gap between her and Yi Chen had not shrunk at all. On the contrary, it seemed to be widening. This made her feel very discouraged, but at the same time, she admired Yi Chen. One had to know that she had never admired anyone for so many years, not even the Heavenly Devil Sovereign or the Evil Sword Emperor. Yi Chen had let her know what it meant to be a peerless genius. In the eyes of the so-called geniuses, perhaps, they were no different from ordinary people. Yi Chen didn't feel anything about the Queen of God Bless Queen's forfeit. He was different from others. His only belief was to reach the peak. The stronger the opponent, the easier it would be to stimulate his fighting spirit and potential. He had always believed that there was nothing he couldn't do, only something he didn't want to do. Now, Yi Chen had also begun to understand the true meaning of the Shura realm. Using powerful opponents to nurture a supreme being, whoever could walk to the end would have the greatest hope of becoming a supreme being. This was because there was only one shortcut to becoming a supreme being, and that was to have an invincible momentum and confidence. Under normal circumstances, if Yi Chen wanted to become a supreme being, he would need at least 1,000 years of accumulation. He believed that the Heavenly Devil Sovereign and the Evil Sword Emperor were also aware of this point. Very tacitly, the gazes of the 3 of them met, accompanied by bursts of murderous intent. The black-white old man lost to the Evil Sword Emperor. The white-robed Emperor lost to the Martial Emperor. The four-winged Dragon Emperor forfeited 3 times. The Golden Combat Emperor lost to Yi Chen. Finally, there were only 4 people left in the entire arena. The 4 of them were the strongest supreme beings. They were the Heavenly Devil Sovereign, the Evil Sword Emperor, the Martial Emperor, and Yi Chen. Among the 4 of them, only one could ascend to the peak, and only one had the hope of becoming a supreme being in the shortest time possible and looking down on the starry sky. At this time, even if they died, the 4 of them wouldn't take a step back. The first to enter the arena were the Evil Sword Emperor and the Martial Emperor. Martial Emperor, it's time for you to fall. This era belongs to us, the younger generation. The huge sword on the Evil Sword Emperor's back floated out and landed in his hand. With every word he said, the momentum of his sword increased. When he said the last word, the violent sword momentum was like a raging sea wave. One wave after another, never ending. Compared to the Evil Sword Emperor, the Martial Emperor was indeed not young. He was already more than 20,000 years old. However, since he was able to become a Martial Emperor, his momentum was naturally very strong. In the face of the Evil Sword Emperor's sword momentum, the Martial Emperor was like a huge mountain in the sea. No matter how fierce the waves were, they couldn't shake him at all. Instead, his momentum became more condensed and vigorous. I have a feeling that if I defeat you, I will become a supreme being. A fiery light flashed in the Martial Emperor's eyes. When he stood next to the Evil Sword Emperor, the threshold of supreme being became much clearer in his eyes. Is that so? Unfortunately, the day will never come. Take my sword. The Evil Sword Emperor slashed at the Martial Emperor with the huge sword in his hand. This sword was simple and unadorned, but the sword intent contained within it was clearly the destruction sword intent. Moreover, it was a mid-8-step sword intent. In addition, the Evil Sword Emperor's sword domain was the same as Yi Chen's, reaching the late 8th layer. Combined with the Heart Sword realm, this probing sword strike was 10 times more dangerous than most supreme beings. Outside the Azura world's bronze gate, dozens of huge phantoms stood there. Behind them was a group of 8th-level life and death realm heavenly kings. They were all people who had entered the Azura world before. As for the phantoms, they were the projections of the supreme beings. In the giant tribe's camp, the Golden Battle Emperor said shamefully, "I was defeated by Sword Emperor Yi Chen. Now there are only 4 people inside: Sky Demonic Emperor, Evil Sword Emperor, Martial Emperor, and Sword Emperor Yi Chen." He was the last person to leave the Azura world apart from the 4. Oh, 2 of the human race's members? Good thing. The supreme projection in front of the Golden Battle Emperor smiled. In front of the human race's camp, a supreme projection let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there were still 2 humans. However, the 2 juniors of the demons and evil spirit race were not easy to deal with either. There are actually 2 humans. That kid Sky Demonic Emperor has never been defeated before. I hope he can remain undefeated this time. The supreme projection in the demons' camp glanced at the human race's camp. On the arena, Yi Chen let out a sigh. The Martial Emperor died under the Evil Sword Emperor's Fate Evil Sword. The Fate Evil Sword was 100 times more powerful than the Heavenly Boundless Sword Art. This sword art could dictate the fate of others. Standing up, Yi Chen and the Sky Demonic Emperor appeared in the arena at the same time. "It's finally our turn." The Sky Demonic Emperor raised his head, his eyes filled with demonic intent. Chapter 1284. The Night Sword Emperor had the Lawless Freedom Sword Art. The Martial Emperor had the Martial Emperor's 3 styles. The Evil Sword Emperor had the Evil Sword of Destiny, and the Celestial Demon Emperor had 2 absolute arts. One was the Celestial Demon Tyrannical Body, and the other was the Heaven and Earth Palm. That's right, the Celestial Demon Emperor was the same as the Golden Battle Emperor and the 4-Winged Dragon Emperor. They were body-refining emperors. The Celestial Demon Tyrannical Body was a body-refining technique that was only slightly inferior to the 9 Transformations Golden Body. The Heaven and Earth Palm contained the profound meaning of yin and yang, and the profound meaning of strength. When one's strength reached a certain realm, one would have the ability to defeat everything with brute force. No matter how exquisite one's technique was, one would be able to break it with one palm. Previously, when Yi Chen was battling with the Golden Battle Emperor, he had already experienced the difficulty of body-refining emperors. If he wasn't serious, he wouldn't be able to break his opponent's defense. However, a simple punch from his opponent was able to break his sword art cleanly. In the end, Yi Chen unleashed his heart force and pierced through the body of the Golden Battle Emperor. Moreover, body-refining emperors didn't only understand brute force. Their martial arts also contained profound meaning and essence. "Yi Chen, you are qualified to fight with me, but only qualified." Celestial Demon Field, Celestial Demon Tyrannical Body. Although he said so, the Celestial Demon Emperor didn't dare to underestimate Yi Chen. The Celestial Demon Field burst forth, and the void was suffused with a metallic luster. Immediately after, the Celestial Demon Emperor's body also suffused with a metallic luster. The space-time he was in gave people a very thick and indestructible feeling, as if it was a world of metal. Kill. From afar, the Celestial Demon Emperor threw a punch at Yi Chen. The ferocious fist force distorted the space-time along the way. At the same time when the Celestial Demon Emperor spread out his Celestial Demon Domain, Yi Chen had already used his Green Lotus Sword Domain. Numerous green lotuses floated around him, and beneath his feet, there was an even larger green lotus, which seemed to be nurturing his body and nurturing a peerless sharpness. Chi 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 chi. The Death Sword net spread out as Yi Chen used Death Cleave. One was a fist force, while the other was a sword net. In terms of power concentration, the fist force was naturally superior. However, the sword net had the advantage in terms of densely packed attacks, covering a wide area. The fist force pierced through the sword net and landed on the green lotus that Yi Chen had used to protect himself. The green lotus trembled and instantly turned into dust, while the remnants of the sword net broke through the Sky Demon Domain and slashed on the Sky Demon Emperor's body, creating sparks and clanging sounds. The first time they fought, they were evenly matched. Seeing that, the two withdrew their respective domains and sword domains. Their bodies flashed, and they clashed together. In terms of close combat, Yi Chen would not be afraid of anyone. Even if he could not, he would still have the 5 elements sword arts to protect himself. On the other hand, the celestial demon emperor was a body-refining emperor, so he was naturally more proficient in close combat. A body-refining emperor and a sword emperor fought crazily, causing the sky to darken. The domineering fist force, palm wind, and sword chi filled the entire arena. The two's figures could be seen everywhere. Heaven and earth in the palm. Suddenly, the celestial demon emperor shouted and pressed down with his palm. This palm was indeed one of the moves of the heaven and earth palm, which could freeze time and space and crush everything. Yi Chen did not dare to be careless. He performed the 5 elements sword arts, turning into a 5-colored light ball to protect himself. Rumble! The huge palm print landed on the 5-colored light ball and was bounced off. So powerful! Yi Chen felt the pressure for the first time. Seeing that he could not break through Yi Chen's 5 elements sword arts, the celestial demon emperor's body was like an inflated balloon, rapidly expanding from 2 meters to 100 meters. He then slapped at Yi Chen again. Crack! The powerful force finally caused the 5 elements sword arts to pause for a moment. You take a sword of mine as well. Yi Chen was already prepared. The 5-colored light ball shrank, and he slashed out with his sword. In an instant, a 5-colored sword chi slashed at the celestial demon emperor, moving as fast as a ray of light. Block it! The celestial demon emperor crossed his arms, shining with a metallic luster. Clang! A loud sound that could shatter a normal planet exploded. The celestial demon emperor was sent flying, crashing into the protective wall of the arena. He bounced back with a bang, rolling on the ground for a long time before the impact of the 5 elements slash was neutralized. In terms of pure lethality, the 5 elements slash was the best among all of Yi Chen's sword arts. Good, very good. The celestial demon emperor looked at his bloodied arms and laughed out of anger. It had been a long time since he had been injured. Ever since the battle with the evil sword emperor, he had never been injured. Heaven and earth 3 tremors. Charging out with large steps, the celestial demon emperor slashed out with his palm. Crack! Crack! Time and space twisted to the extreme, and cracks appeared. Without a choice, Yi Chen performed the 5 elements sword arts again, and pushed its power to the limit. The 5-colored light ball shone brightly. Bang! 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 The 5 elements sword arts that the Yi Jianhuang couldn't break were finally broken. Yi Chen's feet went numb, and he was sent flying while spurting out a mouthful of blood. The celestial demon emperor's palm contained the 3 stacks power. Normal 3 stacks power wasn't scary, but it was the 3 stacks power that was performed with a supreme martial art. Of course, the celestial demon emperor's right arm had exploded, and blood was splattering everywhere. It seemed like his injury was more severe than Yi Chen's. Only Yi Chen knew that the celestial demon emperor's injury was only on the surface, while his injury was on the inside. The 3 stacks power was destroying his body, and his imperishable power was being consumed rapidly. So powerful. But it's only interesting this way. Stumbling on the ground, Yi Chen licked his lips, and a terrifying battle intent burst out from his eyes. A battle without injuries wouldn't be a true battle to one's heart's content. Only with injuries would one be able to stimulate the most primal battle intent and fighting spirit, surpassing one's limits. Die. The celestial demon emperor couldn't be bothered to waste time recovering his right arm. He took a step forward and space and time shrank. He instantly appeared above Yi Chen and slammed down with the heaven and earth palm. Without the 5 elements sword arts, the celestial demon emperor's frail body was no stronger than tofu. He was confident that he could crush the celestial demon emperor with a single palm. Scram! Yi Chen let out a shout and raised the sky dream sword high up. An unstoppable sword chi soared into the sky, slicing the celestial demon emperor's palm into pieces. The aftershock sent the celestial demon emperor flying. Heart sword realm, power profound, and supreme sword arts were perfectly fused together. Swish! Lightly tapping on the ground, Yi Chen's speed instantly reached light speed, and the boundless nature enveloped the celestial demon emperor's body. Ding ding dang dang. Even though the boundless nature art was extremely exquisite, its lethality couldn't compare to the 5 elements slash. The dreamy sword chi slashed on the celestial demon emperor's body, but it could only create some sparks. It couldn't even cut through the celestial demon emperor's flesh. My celestial demon tyrannical body has already reached the peak of the 7th level. It's impervious to weapons, and even heavenly tribulations can't injure it. You want to break through it? Dream on. The celestial demon emperor completely ignored Yi Chen's attack and looked at him with disdain. Among the supremes, the golden Buddha supreme of the human race relied on the golden body 9th transformation to look down on the world. Only a sage weapon could kill him. The celestial demon emperor was equivalent to the golden Buddha supreme of the quasi-supremes, and he also looked down on the world. As long as he didn't exhaust all his demonic energy, even if 10 peak quasi-supremes attacked him for 10 days or half a month, they wouldn't be able to harm a single hair on him. Chapter 1285. Sword Burial. Dozens of petals danced in the air. Seeing that the omniscient nature didn't work, Yi Chen decisively executed the sword burial art. The sharpness of the sword burial art was several times sharper than the omniscient nature. After all, if it wasn't sharp enough, how could it ruin the time and life of others? It's useless. The celestial demon emperor was very confident, but his expression soon froze. Not only did the sword burial art freeze his body, but it also froze his celestial demon tyrannical body, causing a flaw to appear in his celestial demon tyrannical body. The sound of a red-hot sword stabbing into the soil resounded. Yi Chen's sky dream sword had pierced through the celestial demon emperor's heart. Once the celestial demon tyrannical body had a flaw, the celestial demon emperor would be no different from other peak quasi-venerables. Impossible. The celestial demon emperor looked down at his bleeding chest in disbelief. There's no absolute defense in this world. At least before me. Your celestial demon tyrannical body is just so. In terms of the realm of the heart, Yi Chen was much higher than the celestial demon emperor. Only the evil sword emperor could be compared to Yi Chen. Therefore, Yi Chen could ruin the other party's time and cause a flaw in the celestial demon emperor's celestial demon tyrannical body. Of course, only Yi Chen could rely on this to heavily injure the celestial demon emperor. The others didn't have the sword burial art, and the white bone sword emperor's realm was too low. Do you think you can defeat me like this? The battle has only just begun. The celestial demon emperor's body bent backward like a bow. A terrifying power burst out with him as the center. The pitch-black shockwave directly sent Yi Chen flying. Countless black runes appeared on the surface of the celestial demon emperor's body. The runes' radiance circulated and rapidly linked together. Surges of surging energy fluctuated within the celestial demon emperor's body. His strength suddenly increased by more than 10 times. It was as if these runes had brought the celestial demon emperor's vitality to a whole new realm. Secret technique? Yi Chen frowned. At their level, ordinary secret techniques were useless. Only those supreme secret techniques could increase their strength. Clearly, the celestial demon emperor had cultivated a supreme secret technique. In the audience seating, the evil sword emperor's expression was indifferent. He wasn't surprised by the celestial demon emperor's transformation. He had sparred with the celestial demon emperor many times. Although he didn't know the celestial demon emperor inside out, he was very clear about some of his trump cards. The Mayuo Heavenly Battle Rune was a supreme secret technique of the demons. It was divided into 3 layers. Cultivating the first layer would increase one's strength by 5 times. The second layer would increase one's strength by 10 times. Kill. The celestial demon emperor, whose strength had increased by over 10 times, was like a shooting star as he smashed his fist over, causing space to ripple like tidewater as it pressed forward. And its might was countless times stronger than before. Dang! Faced with the celestial fiend emperor's inhuman punch, Yi Chen faced the spatial tide and slashed out a sword chi. However, the sword chi collapsed before it could come into contact with his opponent's fist force. Finally, Yi Chen managed to block the punch with his 5-elemental sword art. Heaven and earth in the palm. The momentum of the celestial demon emperor's fist suddenly dispersed and turned into a palm momentum. It was the heaven and earth in the palm of the universe palm. Previously, the celestial demon emperor couldn't break through the five-elemental sword art. But now he was very confident. You have a supreme secret technique. Don't I have one? Yichen didn't panic at all. Suddenly, a five-colored fruit appeared above his head. It grew bigger and bigger, and the five elements essence chi in the space-time merged into it. Finally, it blessed Yichen. The human body had yin and yang, and the five elements essence chi. When the five elements essence chi entered his body, Yichen felt that his realm seemed to have taken a step forward. However, the surge of essence, chi, and spirit made him feel like he couldn't control it. Supreme secret technique, five elements Tao fruit. The upper echelons of the human clan began to spare no effort in cultivating Yichen. After coming out of the supreme holy land, the upper echelons of the human clan gave Yichen 2 life and death fruits, and several top-notch emperor-level weapons. They also gave him a very precious supreme secret technique, 5 elements Tao fruit. It should be known that supreme secret techniques were countless times more precious and rare than supreme martial arts. Only legendary supremes could create it. Originally, the upper echelons of the human clan didn't expect Yichen to succeed in cultivating it in such a short time. They just hoped that Yichen could broaden his horizons and have a little understanding of the supreme secret technique. However, the upper echelons of the human clan didn't know that Yichen had obtained the inheritance of the Supreme Three Realms in the Supreme Holy Land. The Supreme Three Realms was a top-notch expert among the legendary Supremes, and he had created several supreme secret techniques. These supreme secret techniques were even more tyrannical than the 5 elements Tao fruit. Yichen had only learned a little bit of it. Therefore, it was much easier for him to cultivate the 5 elements Tao fruit, which allowed Yichen to cultivate it to the minor completion realm in one go. 5-colored radiance circulated on the surface of Yichen's body. Yichen held the Sky Dream Sword and slashed out fiercely. The Death Sword net was countless times more violent than the most violent storm. It instantly tore the Celestial Demon Emperor's palm print apart. Clang! 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 Black symbols flickered on the Celestial Demon Emperor's body. It seemed like he was enduring a huge pressure. 3 shocks of heaven and earth. The Celestial Demon Emperor roared furiously and slashed out with the 3 shocks of heaven and earth palm. Each wave was more tyrannical than the previous one, and each wave was crazier than the previous one. The space-time trembled and collapsed. Break for me. Becoming one with the sword, Yichen used the 5 elements slash that he had never used before. Even his body was integrated into it, just to increase the power of this sword. 5-colored radiance flashed as the space-time tide was separated, clashing with the palm energy. Puff! The first to cough up blood was Yichen. The 3 shocks of heaven and earth palm was too tyrannical. In front of the vibrating power, all defenses seemed so fragile. Fortunately, the 5 elements slash was not to be trifled with. With the circulation of the 5 elements, it was enough to dissolve most of the vibrations. After breaking through the palm energy, Yichen used his sword energy and continued to attack the Celestial Demon Emperor. Get lost! The Celestial Demon Emperor waved his palm, blocking the attacks again and again. At this point, the two of them had long since gone crazy. The evil Sword Emperor's expression was no longer indifferent. Instead, it became more and more solemn and gloomy. He had never thought that Yichen's battle prowess would be so powerful that he could force the Celestial Demon Emperor to such a level. In terms of changes in attack, how could the Celestial Demon Emperor compare to Yichen? Finding an opening, Yichen turned into a sword light and brushed past the Celestial Demon Emperor's neck. Puff! A huge head flew up. However, the next moment, it was caught by the Celestial Demon Emperor and reattached to his neck, continuing to fight. Let's see how long you can last. In fact, Yichen's pure battle prowess was about the same as the Celestial Demon Emperor. However, Yichen's battle techniques were too superb, and the Celestial Demon Emperor was much weaker than Yichen. This slight difference caused the Celestial Demon Emperor to fall into a passive situation, and the speed at which his energy was consumed was more than 2 times that of Yichen. Damn it! How could the Celestial Demon Emperor not know that the situation was very disadvantageous for him? He wanted to break through and surpass himself. Only by surpassing himself could he kill Yi Chen. Everything is over. Yi Chen, who was one with the sword, changed his sword stance. The 5 elements turned into the sword burial art. The sword stance froze the celestial demon emperor's body. And then, the sword pierced through the celestial demon emperor's body. However, it was not over yet. Yi Chen shuttled back and forth, piercing countless holes on the celestial demon emperor's body. When Yi Chen left the celestial demon emperor's body, the latter was already riddled with holes, and countless sword lights were spurting out. I can't accept this. The celestial demon emperor roared at the sky and turned into ashes. Chapter 1286. With the death of the heavenly demonic emperor, Yi Chen's taut nerves relaxed, and an indescribable exhaustion enveloped his body and soul. The heavenly demonic emperor was too powerful, and the inextinguishable energy in his body was running low. Once it was used up, a single palm from the heavenly demonic emperor would be equivalent to 10 slashes from him. Other than that, it was fortunate that the heavenly demonic emperor's heart force realm wasn't high. If it was a little higher than Yi Chen's, or if it was on par with Yi Chen wouldn't be able to freeze the heavenly demonic emperor's body with the sword burial art. Without this, he wouldn't be able to injure the heavenly demonic emperor, not to mention killing him. Gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. The azura spring water boiled, and a dozen drops of water flew out, merging with Yi Chen's body. In an instant, Yi Chen's body and soul returned to their peak state, and his inextinguishable energy was also replenished. He was ready for another battle. Raising his head, Yi Chen looked at the evil sword emperor in the spectator stand. Their gazes collided from afar, creating invisible sparks. Enveloped by a red pillar of light, the evil sword emperor appeared on the stage. I really didn't expect that the final battle with me would be you. The evil sword emperor took out the cross-shaped sword on his back with a gentle expression. The tip of the sword was lowered to the ground, and his eyes were calm, without a trace of evil aura around him. Who can grasp the future? Isn't this fate? Holding the Sky Dream sword, Yi Chen's sword aura was brewing. That's right, the future can't be grasped, but it can be guided. Let my evil sword of destiny guide you. With a wave of the cross-shaped sword, the violent sword chi turned into a boundless river of sword chi, rushing toward Yi Chen. Before this surging sword chi, a human strength seemed so insignificant, like an ordinary person facing the tide of time. The evil sword emperor didn't make a move, but when he did, he used a sword art that contained destiny. If destiny can be guided, then this isn't the true destiny. The true destiny is high above, unless you can cultivate to the demigod realm. Facing the evil sword emperor's killing move, Yi Chen did not retreat or evade. If he took a step back, his sword force would weaken by a bit. In this situation, the evil sword of destiny might really be able to guide his fate. Taking a step forward, Yi Chen's long hair fluttered in the wind. He raised the heavenly dream sword high up in the air, then chopped down with all his might. It was the 5 elements cut. Rumble! The 5-colored sword radiance slashed through the waves, splitting apart wave after wave of sword chi river, causing space to shake endlessly. Fate is guided by me. Your fate is destined to be a grave. Rest in peace. The tomb of fate. The evil sword emperor suddenly soared into the sky, his cross-shaped greatsword blocking one of the suns above the Shiraba, shining down a cross-shaped shadow that blotted out the sky. The next moment, the cross-shaped shadow wriggled and turned into graves with crosses stuck in them. The largest grave was slowly rising, and Yi Chen, who was above the grave, felt his feet become heavy as an invisible force dragged him down. Behind him, there was an illusory shadow of a cross. What a powerful sword Tao! He actually fused the sword Tao and the Tao of fate together. Yi Chen was shocked. Everyone's sword Tao was different. It was very obvious that the evil sword emperor's sword Tao was the sword Tao of fate. He used fate to pave the way, and the sword Tao to guide. Seeing that Yi Chen was about to be buried, a disrespectful sword chi shot up into the sky. In front of this sword chi, everything was fake, everything was just an illusion. This sword chi was powerful enough to tear apart all the darkness and everything that stood in its way. My sword Dao is open and aboveboard, free and unfettered. It is the purest sword Dao. How are you going to bury me? Pung! The illusory shadow of the cross behind him collapsed, and the invisible force beneath his feet was severed. Yi Chen, who was one with the sword, also soared into the sky. Death cleave. Rising to the same height as the evil sword emperor, Yi Chen exited the state of one with the sword. He swept out with his sword, and a boundless sword net enveloped the evil sword emperor, sealing him from all directions. The evil sword emperor's expression did not change. He held the huge cross-shaped sword in front of him. Wang, a huge cross-shaped sword light protected him, making him look like the ruler of fate. Ding ding dang dang. The sword net cut on the cross-shaped sword light, emitting a crisp sound of metal colliding. They were all bounced off, unable to harm the evil sword emperor in the slightest. Everything in the world has a flaw. Break. His figure flashed, and Yi Chen instantly appeared before the evil sword emperor. The sky dream sword shook, and countless sword lights burst out, no more no less exactly 1,000,000. Clearly, he had reached the limit of the number of changes. 5 elements sword art, universal manifestation. Puchi. The cross-shaped sword light bounced off 999,999 sword lights, but the last sword light broke through the protection of the cross-shaped sword light, piercing toward the evil sword emperor's forehead. Sword of fate. The evil sword emperor closed his eyes, and an illusory cross-shaped sword shadow shot out from his forehead. Not only did the cross-shaped sword shadow contain a soul attack, but it also contained the evil sword emperor's sword of fate. Clang! Yi Chen's sky dream sword was blocked. In addition, a sword chi-like soul power flowed through the sky dream sword, trying to enter Yi Chen's body. The evil sword emperor's expression changed. His soul attack had actually been blocked by a protective sword will. Immortal sword will. The evil sword emperor looked at Yi Chen. Not bad. Yi Chen pointed out with his left hand, and sword chi erupted, containing the destruction sword will. The evil sword emperor also pointed out with his left hand, passing over his right arm, and colliding with Yi Chen's sword finger. Boom! A shockwave spread out, and the two were simultaneously sent flying. Praise of fate! 5 elements Dao fruit. It was just a test before, and after that the two brought out their greatest abilities. The evil sword emperor, who used the supreme secret art praise of fate, was covered in white light, and a faint hymn of fate was being sung. His aura rose infinitely, and his eyes were cold and emotionless, like the eyes of a god. Different from the evil sword emperor, Yi Chen's body was covered in 5-colored light, and his eyes contained a soaring sword will. His sharp gaze pierced through everything, tearing apart the sky. Kill. The two clashed. Sword burial art. Yi Chen's sword froze time and space, and dozens of petals fell. Your sword burial art is useless against me. The evil sword emperor was not restrained in the slightest, and blocked Yi Chen's attack with his sword. The two's heart sword realm was similar. Although the sword burial art contained the power of time and space, and could freeze time and space, the evil sword emperor's sword art also contained the power of the sword Dao of fate, which could resolve unfavorable situations. Take my evil sword of fate. Endless evil power erupted, and the evil sword emperor's sword began to become strange. It was clearly a straight-line attack, but as soon as Yi Chen counterattacked, the attack's path would become twisted, accompanied by one sword force vortex after another, binding Yi Chen's sword art. It was as if Yi Chen was offering himself to be slaughtered. Startled, Yi Chen hurriedly used the 5 elements sword art peak decline. Sword Dao of fate, how can you block it? The evil sword emperor sneered, and his sword momentum continued to increase. Sword chi began to seep into the 5 elements sword art, destroying its stability. The evil sword of fate is so strange. Unfortunately, it has lost the superiority of fate. Heart force erupted, and Yi Chen's 5 elements sword art became perfect chaotic element again. Vast sword light spread out, covering the evil sword emperor. Unknowingly, the evil sword emperor's movements slowed down, and so did his sword speed. Chi. With a flash of sword light, Yi Chen sliced open the evil sword emperor's body. After so many battles, Yi Chen's 5 elements sword art was constantly improving. although he might not be able to defend against the Heavenly Devil Emperor's three-universe shock. It was mainly because the explosive power of the three-universe shock was too strong, and it could break the five elements sword art in an instant. However, it could defend against the evil sword of fate's attack. After injuring the evil sword emperor, Yi Chen was about to finish him off in a spurt of energy. Suddenly, he felt an intense danger, and he couldn't help but teleport dozens of li away. In the next moment, a majestic sword force vortex appeared at his previous location, and the space-time there shattered. Not bad. It wasn't distortion, and it wasn't the collapse of the space-time laws, but direct destruction. Yi Chen, I really have to thank you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have been able to break through. Although I'm not a supreme yet, I'm moving towards it. I can feel that my understanding of the Fate Sword Dao is getting deeper and deeper, and my life level is also increasing. The evil sword emperor turned around and smiled at Yi Chen. His body was growing taller bit by bit. It didn't seem obvious, but in Yi Chen's eyes, it was undoubtedly happening. Apart from being powerful, a Supreme's life level was also different from an 8th level life and death realm expert. Therefore, they were much taller than ordinary people. For example, the Golden Buddha Supreme was 6 meters tall, which was the normal height of the Golden Buddha Supreme. As for ordinary Supreme beings, they were at least 9 meters tall. Once the Evil Sword Emperor reached 9 meters, he would become a true Supreme being, and he would be able to kill Yi Chen with a single breath. Of course, looking at the trend of the Evil Sword Emperor's body, it would take at least a year and a half for him to reach 9 meters. This was because the fundamental evolution of life level was not that fast. Even so, the threat that the Evil Sword Emperor brought to Yi Chen was more than 10 times greater than before, and he was growing stronger by the second. Chapter 1287. Whoosh! The Evil Sword Emperor raised his cross-shaped sword high. He didn't use any sword technique, just a simple slash. However, this slash had the power to sever space-time. Wuxia's space-time crack spread out. Time seemed to stop, and the entire arena appeared to be in a state of stillness. Only that space-time crack was spreading at the speed of light. The Heart Sword realm erupted, and Yi Chen's reaction was unprecedentedly powerful. However, he still couldn't catch the trajectory of the space-time crack. Fortunately, Yi Chen had already opened the Netherworld Sacred Eye. With the help of the Netherworld Sacred Eye, Yi Chen finally saw a sword chi shuttling through the depths of space-time. This sword chi was 100 times more violent than the 5 elements slash. Once hit, Yi Chen wouldn't be able to recover even if he had 10 lives. Swish! Relying on his comprehension of space-time profound, Yi Chen's figure slid, dodging the attack of the sword chi. However, he was still a bit too slow, and his left arm was chopped off. Amazing! If I didn't make a breakthrough like him, I would have died without a doubt. It had always been Yi Chen who made breakthroughs in battle. This time, he had finally encountered a peerless genius who could also make a breakthrough in battle. While Yi Chen was extremely fearful, he also felt an absurd trace of joy. This joy came at the wrong time, and even Yi Chen found it strange. Oh, amazing! Your comprehension of time profound should have reached 30%, right? The Evil Sword Emperor wasn't in a hurry to kill Yi Chen. Perhaps he felt that Yi Chen was already doomed, and killing him too quickly would be meaningless. Not bad. Unfortunately, in the face of absolute power, it's not worth mentioning. Yi Chen said calmly. His left arm quickly grew back under the effect of the immortal power. Hehe, you do know your limits. The Evil Sword Sovereign was somewhat surprised that Yi Chen could remain so calm. He was right. Absolute power could even sever space and time. What could it not do? Of course, if Yi Chen was at the same realm as the Evil Sword Emperor, it would be a different story. Using absolute power to sever space-time would require twice the effort for half the result. Moreover, it would only be able to sever space-time in a small area. Once one comprehended the profound space-time profound, they would be able to control space-time over a large area. If others wanted to sever space-time in front of them, they would have to spend 10 or even 100 times the effort. Cut the crap. Today, you will die without a doubt. Take my fate cross slash. The evil sword sovereign's aura grew stronger and stronger. Although it would take a year and a half for his vitality to increase, his evil energy and comprehension of martial arts were growing rapidly. The evil sword sovereign slashed out with his cross-shaped greatsword in front of his chest, his sword technique containing the trajectory of fate. An illusory chant rang out, and the cross-shaped sword radiance covered the sky and earth. Time and space were not torn apart, but were completely assimilated by the cross-shaped sword radiance, releasing a white glow. Yi Chen wanted to dodge, but he discovered that space-time was actually locked by an invisible force. The current him was like a bird in a cage. Yi Chen's pupil shrank again and again, turning into a small golden dot. Golden lightning flashed in his pupils, but even so, he couldn't see the specific trajectory of the cross-shaped sword radiance. He could only see layers of space-time, like an illusion, being pierced by the cross-shaped sword radiance. The netherworld sacred eye could only see the traces left behind by the cross-shaped sword radiance. Swish! White light blossomed in front of him, and the huge cross-shaped sword radiance carried an undefiable aura as it suddenly attacked. Yi Chen's thoughts froze in an instant. At this moment, he forgot his own existence. At this moment he forgot everything. Muddle-headed, he didn't know where he was. Finally, a dot of light appeared. It was a strange light that pierced through the universe, pierced through the primal chaos, and arrived on a small, beautiful planet. An illusory soul floated up, fusing with the strange light. As memories flowed, Yi Chen recalled everything. So my name is Yi Chen. My arrival in this world is the arrangement of fate. Since I'm here, I've never thought of living an ordinary life. And this isn't my final destination. My final destination, in the endless future, I can't die. I can't die. I can't die. The stubborn will awaken the hidden potential in Yi Chen's body. This potential erupted at a speed that surpassed human comprehension. His chi and blood were blooming with light. His bone marrow was blooming with light. And his soul was blooming with light. Endless light gushed out, intertwined, and finally fused perfectly. As the evil sword sovereign waved his sword, a faint smile appeared on his face. The one who had the last laugh was ultimately him. In his line of sight, Yi Chen had long been submerged by the cross-shaped sword radiance. It's not over yet. Suddenly, a voice came from the depths of space-time. Then, the cross-shaped sword radiance collapsed, and an incomparably sharp and peerless sword chi cut through the locked space-time, slashing towards the evil sword sovereign. Clang! Sparks shone in all directions. The evil sword sovereign was sent flying with a look of disbelief on his face. His eyes stared blankly at the space-time vortex in front of him. From the space-time vortex, Yi Chen walked out step by step. His body was spotless, and his long black hair fluttered with the space-time turbulence, taking root in the void. Now I know why I felt a trace of joy in my heart when you broke through. Because if you break through, it means that I will break through as well. Yi Chen looked at the evil sword sovereign with a smile. The evil sword sovereign took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, I have to admit that you're the most terrifying opponent I've ever met in my life. Even the celestial demonic emperor is far from being as terrifying as you are. Unfortunately, you broke through after me. In a short period of time, my martial arts realm has improved by leaps and bounds. Do you think you're a match for me? Before breaking through, the strength of both parties was about the same, and the difference wasn't that big. It was a competition of who broke through first. After all, the earlier one broke through, the longer the improvement time. Oh, is that so? Why do I feel that I'm also improving very quickly? It seems like a long time has passed just now. Yi Chen spread out his left hand and made a grabbing motion. An illusory space-time cube appeared in his hand and slowly rotated in Yi Chen's palm. This is 50% time profound. No, 60% time profound. The evil sword sovereign had an unprecedented trace of jealousy. At their realm, they basically had to comprehend the space-time profound. Before breaking through, his time profound was only at 10% realm. After breaking through, his time profound reached 30% realm. He originally thought that his progress was fast enough, and when he became an autarch, he would be able to grasp 40% time profound. However, compared to Yi Chen, he paled in comparison. It must be known that the higher one's time profound was, the harder it was to comprehend. Yi Chen's breakthrough from 30% realm to 60% realm was more than 100 times more difficult than his breakthrough from 10% realm to 30% realm. Even if your time profound has reached 60% realm. So what? Our heart sword realm is the same. My fate sword art can even resolve any unfavorable situation. The sword burial art is still useless against me. The evil sword sovereign's sword aura exploded, and a strange fate evil sword attacked towards Yi Chen. This time, the fate evil sword art was hundreds of times stronger than before. I forgot to tell you that my green lotus sword spell has already broken through to the supreme level. My green lotus sword domain has also reached the peak of the 8th level. Activating his sword energy, green lotuses appeared one after another around Yi Chen. Before the evil sword emperor's fate evil sword could even touch Yi Chen, it was blocked outside. Chapter 1288. The difference between the late stage of the 8th level and the peak of the 8th level was huge. The late stage of the 8th level meant that you had already used the 8th level of the sword domain to a mature level, and the peak of the 8th level meant that you had fully developed the power of the 8th level of the sword domain. And the supreme cultivation method was even more amazing. With the supreme cultivation method, the level of energy was no longer the same. A single strand of energy could cause great destruction. In addition, the supreme cultivation method contained the mysteries of the universe, and the method of using energy had reached perfection. With his protective sword Yuan and green lotus sword realm, Yi Chen was able to block out the full power attack of the evil sword emperor. It was all because of the usage of his sword Yuan. If one observed carefully, one would be able to see that his protective sword Yuan was made up of countless tiny triangles, which could disperse and absorb external power. Impossible! The evil sword emperor's eyes widened as he attacked Yi Chen again. Yi Chen shook his head and made a grabbing motion with his left hand. Puff! The evil sword emperor's sword Qi was like a swallow returning to its nest. Yi Chen accurately grasped its trajectory, and it walked right into the space-time cube. The cube collapsed, and the evil sword emperor's sword Qi appeared behind him strangely, bombarding fiercely. Wah! A large amount of blood sprayed out. It was already extremely lucky that the evil sword emperor was still alive after taking on his most powerful attack. Death cut. Yi Chen didn't plan to play with the evil sword emperor any longer, and the death cut was instantly unleashed. The current death cut was more than 1,000 times more powerful than before. With a wave of the sword, the space-time was shattered. The evil sword emperor seemed to be sealed in a huge transparent crystal, and then completely shattered, turning into millions of tiny crystals. Fate makes fools of people. The evil sword emperor's voice faded away with the wind. Is he finally going to become a supreme? After killing the evil sword emperor, Yi Chen sighed. In an era where true gods couldn't appear, supreme was already the peak. As for demigods, they were also supreme, just with a bit of God's power. The lifespan of a supreme was no longer 100,000 years, but more than 100,000 years. As for how long they could live, it varied from person to person, but it wasn't impossible to live over 1,000,000 years. Of course, only legendary supreme could do that. Once one became a supreme, he would be qualified to roam the entire universe and explore the ultimate mysteries of the universe, such as the heavenly river, hell, miracles, and many more. No one knew how many mysteries there were in the universe. Perhaps only true gods knew, but true gods couldn't appear. Demigods were already the limit, and their power would probably be suppressed by the universe. Let me think about it first. Just like the evil sword sovereign, he was only advancing towards the supremacy level. He had yet to become a supremacy, because in order to become a supremacy, he had to do his best to break through the supremacy tribulation. If he couldn't pass it, it would all be for naught. The Azura spring water boiled, and a whole 10,000 drops of it flew toward Yi Chen, entering his body. Crackle! His bones, blood, and soul underwent earth-shattering changes. His evolution speed had increased by more than 100 times. At this speed, he would be able to complete his life evolution in a few days. Just as Yi Chen was thinking about how to get out, the arena's environment changed drastically, turning into a boundless mountain range. Each mountain was larger than a planet, and floating within the mountains was not a simple white mist. Instead, it was ribbons of light that looked like galaxies, shining in all sorts of colors. In the sky, there was a sun and a moon. Such a terrifying natural energy. Yi Chen stood on top of one of the most majestic peaks, sensing the yuan qi around him. He could not help but be shocked. The structure of the yuan qi here was very complicated, way more complicated than the yuan qi inside the yuan stones. Training here would be much easier than training with the yuan stones, and he would not have to worry about not having enough yuan stones to make a breakthrough. Let's break through here. Yi Chen didn't think too much. He sat down and started to operate his supreme art, the Green Lotus Sword spell. The current Green Lotus Sword arts were extremely mysterious, as if a galaxy was revolving. Correspondingly, the efficiency was countless times higher. After circulating a dozen laps, Yi Chen felt the Supreme Realm bottleneck loosen. When it reached the 36th laps, the Supreme Realm bottleneck loudly shattered, and boundless yuan qi poured into Yi Chen's body from all directions. Outside. What's going on? Is the battle not over yet? I guess they're evenly matched. It won't be that easy to decide the winner. Yeah, let's wait a little longer. There will be a winner eventually. Some of the supreme projections discussed among themselves. 1 zhang, 2 zhang, 3 zhang. Yi Chen's height kept changing. From a normal human's height to 3 zhang, he was around 10 meters tall. Even sitting there, he was twice as tall as before. He looked like a god sitting in meditation, and a terrifying pressure was released without restraint. Yi Chen was the center of everything. It's still growing. Yi Chen's body and soul were numb. The evolution of life didn't only affect his body, but his soul as well. At 3 zhang, his physical body was many times stronger. His spirit body had reached the mid-8th rank, and the quality and density of his soul were also increasing crazily. Every movement of his seemed to contain the power of a galaxy. Apart from that, his sword energy was also increasing, close to 100 times. The cyan sword energy didn't have a single trace of impurity, and was thousands of times purer than the purest crystal. No wonder no matter how strong a quasi-sovereign is, they can't surpass a supreme. They can't even compare to 1,000th of a supreme. A quasi-sovereign and a supreme are two completely different life forms. One is a mid-tier life form, while the other is a high-tier life form. No amount of effort can make up for the difference. A supreme can kill the strongest quasi-sovereign with a single breath. The changes in his body allowed Yi Chen to clearly understand the difference between a supreme and a quasi-sovereign. 3 zhang and 5 zhang. 3 zhang and 8 zhang. 4 zhang. Yi Chen's height was still growing. It was because Yi Chen's foundation was too deep, and he had refined more than 10,000 drops of azure spring water. One had to know that a supreme strength wasn't measured by height, but height was also a part of one's strength. The taller one was, the more robust one's foundation was. 3 zhang was the foundation of an ordinary supreme, 4 zhang was the foundation of a supreme, and 5 zhang was the foundation of a supreme. As for the Golden Buddha Supreme, it was mainly because he cultivated the 9 transformations of the golden body that he could reach 6 zhang. Therefore, the foundation of a Golden Buddha Supreme was higher than that of the true Martial Supreme and Heavenly Devil Supreme. 4 zhang and 2 zhang. 4 zhang and 3 zhang. 4 zhang and 5 zhang. 4 zhang and 8 zhang. When Yi Chen's height reached 4 zhang, his height finally stopped growing. At the same time, the sky darkened and chaotic lightning flashed. This was the sign of the supreme tribulation. The more robust one's foundation was, the more terrifying the supreme tribulation would be. Yi Chen knew this. Chapter 1289. Kacha. A bolt of chaotic lightning as thick as a water bucket descended from the sky, fiercely striking at Yi Chen. Before it even got close, the electric current had already turned the majestic mountain beneath Yi Chen's feet into a jade mountain filled with lightning. The internal structure of the mountain was clearly visible to everyone's eyes. Yi Chen didn't dare to let the chaotic lightning strike his body. Although his current foundation allowed him to withstand a few bolts of lightning without suffering any injuries, the next supreme tribulation would definitely be more violent. He had to maintain his peak condition from start to finish, and he couldn't afford to take any risks. Raising the Sky Dream sword, Yi Chen slashed at the lightning. The peerless sword Qi shattered the chaotic lightning into pieces, and the remaining lightning turned into a net of electricity, covering Yi Chen's body. Crackle! Yi Chen's entire body was bathed in electricity, and some of the impurities on his body that couldn't be seen were refined into nothingness by the lightning. The evolution of my life level is even faster. Yi Chen could feel that the evolution of his life level had sped up a lot. Soon, the second bolt of chaotic lightning arrived. This time, it was like a heavenly saber, and it was extremely fast. It slashed at Yi Chen, and the surrounding time-space cracked black. Clang! Yi Chen shattered the Chaos Sky Saber with a single sword strike. The third supreme tribulation was a house-sized ball of chaotic lightning that contained a terrifying power of lightning. In front of this power, time seemed to stop, and space seemed to retreat. Only the rumbling of the chaotic lightning balls could be heard. With the death cleave, Yi Chen passed the third tribulation. Next was the fourth tribulation. The fifth tribulation was even more terrifying. The fourth tribulation was a sea of blades and swords formed by chaotic lightning. When it slashed down, it was as though there were countless heaven-defying quasi-sovereigns attacking Yi Chen, giving off a feeling of impenetrable despair. The fifth tribulation was an ancient lightning cannon formed by chaotic lightning. Lightning condensed at the mouth of the cannon, and it was constantly brewing. An aura that could destroy heaven and earth was emitted from it. When it didn't attack, it would shake the heavens and earth. After passing the first 5 tribulations with great difficulty, the sixth tribulation arrived. The sixth tribulation was different from the previous 5. It evolved from the chaotic nature into yin and yang lightning, and it was equivalent to a supreme yin and yang profound martial art that attacked Yi Chen. Within the dark clouds, yin-yang lightning balls, yin-yang Dao diagrams, and even black and white palms appeared. Crackle! The yin-yang lightning sphere was the first to descend, exploding on Yi Chen's body like a series of cannons, bursting forth with thousands of lightning sparks. Then, the yin-yang Dao diagram descended, trying to erase Yi Chen's life imprint. The most frightening thing was the distinct black and white palms. Yi Chen even suspected that these palms belonged to Supremes, and they were attacking him. His body was charred black. Yi Chen had crossed the sixth tribulation. If the sixth tribulation was yin-yang heavenly tribulation, then the seventh tribulation was the 5 elements heavenly tribulation. The dark clouds in the sky slowly parted, and a giant mountain filled with 5-colored lightning appeared. This was the 5 elements Thunder Mountain. According to the records, 50% of Supremes would die beneath the 5 elements Thunder Mountain when they crossed the Supreme Tribulation. Once the 5 elements Thunder Mountain pressed down, no matter how great one's abilities were, they would still be pressed down, unable to move. Then, they would be refined into ash, more dead than dead. Yi Chen was very clear that he could not allow the 5 elements Thunder Mountain to fall on his body. Therefore he attacked it with all his might. Death Cleave. 5 elements slash. Sword Burial Art. Yi Chen used all the sword skills he could use. The 5 elements Thunder Mountain was slashed open one after another. Break for me. With a loud roar, Yi Chen once again slashed out with a 5-colored sword Qi, colliding with the 5 elements Thunder Mountain. Pung! The 5 elements Thunder Mountain exploded. Countless rays of light flickered between the heaven and earth. Even his soul power felt like it was being burned. Before Yi Chen could take a breather, the tribulation clouds in the sky boiled intensely. A boundless and terrifying aura was unfathomable. Thunder and lightning explosions resounded throughout the sky, filling the atmosphere with emptiness. At the same time, a spear the size of a planet poked out from the tribulation clouds. The tip of the spear flickered with lightning. Occasionally, 1 or 2 lightning arcs would be attracted by the ground and sweep down, plowing the mountains into pieces. Judgment Tribulation. Yi Chen's eyes narrowed into slits. Supreme's tribulations were divided into different levels. For ordinary Supremes, they only needed to cross the 7th tribulation, the five elements Thunder Mountain. Only supremes with extremely deep foundations and strength would face the eighth tribulation, the Judgment Tribulation. The Judgment Tribulation was the judgment of the universe. When the Judgment Spear descended, even supremes would have to retreat. This was because the Judgment Spear would become stronger when facing strong opponents. If supremes were swept up by it, they would suffer a destructive blow. Good timing. Yi Chen's eyes shot out two beams of light that were thousands of meters long. As his battle intent surged, his Green Lotus sword realm expanded to its limit. Countless mountain-sized green lotuses bloomed in the air. With a rough look, there were at least thousands of them. In the center of the Green Lotus sword realm, Yi Chen's body shone with a circle of green light. It was his protective sword Yuan. 2 layers of defense had been activated, but Yi Chen felt that it was still not enough. He performed the 5 elements sword art. 5-colored sword light filled the air, turning into a 5-colored light ball that enveloped Yi Chen. Amidst the rumbling thunder, the Judgment Spear finally pierced toward Yi Chen. Millions of lightning snakes coiled around the spear, further increasing its might. Rip! Almost effortlessly, Yi Chen's Green Lotus sword domain was pierced through by the Judgment Spear. In the next second, his protective sword Yuan was also pierced through. Dang! Fortunately, the 5 elements sword art was powerful enough. It finally blocked the Judgment Spear. The two were in a stalemate. Gradually, the Judgment Spear could not hold on anymore. It scattered into countless lightning snakes, turning the mountains into a sea of lightning snakes. The last trial, I have passed it. From now on, I will be free and unfettered in the universe. Yi Chen raised his head and looked at the tribulation clouds. He had a premonition that his supreme tribulation would be the most powerful supreme tribulation of the 9th level. The tribulation clouds did not disperse. Yi Chen's premonition had come true. Under Yi Chen's gaze, the tribulation clouds collapsed crazily. They eventually turned into a 10 million meter tall phantom that stood on the tribulation clouds. Lightning dragons coiled around the phantom's body, and a destructive aura filled the air. The phantom reached out his right hand. In his hand, lightning was violent. Another Judgment Spear was formed. It was even more condensed and terrifying than the previous one. Thunder God Phantom. Yi Chen took a deep breath. Thunder God was a true god. The moment he became a true god, a part of his will merged with the universe, replacing the universe to carry out the Thunder Punishment Heaven Tribulation. The Phantom of Thunder God appeared in the sky, carrying the power to destroy the world. At this moment, Yi Chen not only had to deal with the universe's will, but also the Thunder God's will. You really think highly of me? Yi Chen had seen the will of the puppet true god in hell. Naturally, he knew how terrifying the will of a true god was. Of course, the Thunder God's will in front of him was only one of the billions of Thunder God's will. The stronger the person going through the trial, the stronger the Thunder God's will. It was impossible for a complete Thunder God's will to appear. Otherwise, even a demigod would not be able to go through. Chapter 1290. The Thunder God's face could not be seen clearly. Only his eyes were like 2 abyss-like whirlpools of lightning. He stared at Yi Chen, and with a flick of his right hand, the spear of judgment shot towards Yi Chen. Boom! Yi Chen did not know how loud the sound of creation was. He only knew that the spear shot out by the Thunder God was countless times louder than any sound he had ever heard in his life. It was as if what was thrown out was not the spear of judgment, but a bolt of lightning condensed from the primal chaos. It seemed as if it would blow up the heavens and the earth, pierce through the universe, and turn everything in front of him into ashes. Yi Chen did not have the time to think about how horrifying this spear was. The only thought in his mind was to increase his power at all costs. Facing this spear of judgment, if he did not increase his power beyond his limit, he would be blown into nothingness, and even his soul would be shattered into pieces. Above his head, the 5 elements Dao fruit appeared. When he was a quasi-sovereign, the 5 elements Dao fruit could increase Yi Chen's strength by more than 10 times. Now that he was a sovereign, the 5 elements Dao fruit could at most increase his strength by 1 or 2 times, unless he could cultivate it to the great accomplishment or even the great perfection realm. But to be able to increase it by 1 or 2 times was already very good. It was better than no increase at all. At the same time, Yi Chen's sword energy circulated at a speed 10 times faster than before. On the surface of his body, flowers of blood bloomed. This was a sign that his sword energy was circulating too fast. Not enough. Yi Chen roared. He continued to accelerate the circulation of his sword energy. 15 times, 20 times, 30 times, 50 times. This method of killing 1,000 enemies at the cost of 800 oneself would not be used under normal circumstances, unless it was a moment of certain death. Because once it was used, it would cause great damage to the body, and it would cause the sovereign's life imprint to collapse. But right now, Yi Chen did not care so much. If he could not withstand this calamity, there would be no future, so he might as well give it a try. Crackle! Yi Chen was 48 feet tall. Large amounts of blood burst out, converging into rivers of blood that dyed the majestic mountain below red. After doing all this, the spear of judgment came crashing down. Sword burial art. Yi Chen, who was bathed in blood, displayed his strongest sword burial technique so far. As this sword was unleashed, nearly 200 petals swept down, and the terrifying sword momentum slightly froze the judgment spear for a moment. Although this momentary pause seemed insignificant, sometimes it was this small gap that would cause you to die without a burial place. The spear of judgment, which had paused for a second, continued to fall. It tore open the green lotus sword realm, pierced through Yi Chen's sword burial spell, and Yi Chen's protective sword yuan, and finally landed heavily on Yi Chen's body. Rumble! The majestic mountain that was filled with lightning was instantly annihilated. Yi Chen was blasted deep into the ground. Looking down, he couldn't see the bottom at all. It was pitch black, and he didn't know how deep it was. The tribulation clouds gradually dispersed, and the phantom of the thunder god dissipated. Only the broken mountains and the flickering electric arcs were left. The bottomless pit in the middle of the mountains was quiet, and only the slight sound of the electric arcs could be heard. Did I finally make it through? A pile of bloody flesh flew out of the deep pit. The flesh wriggled and turned into a huge naked human figure. It was indeed Yi Chen. The judgment spear continued to tear open the green lotus sword realm, the sword burial spell, and the protective sword yuan. Even so, Yi Chen was almost smashed into pieces. It was half luck that he was able to make it through. But Yi Chen looked at his body and forced a smile. He was in a bad situation right now. His life mark had been destroyed a lot, and his lifespan had probably been reduced by a lot. His power was only 1/10 of what it used to be, and his original height of 48 meters had shrunk to around 10 meters. It was easy to see how much damage the judgment spear had done to his body. However, Yi Chen had worried for nothing. The moment he flew out of the deep pit, the time and space around him changed, and he appeared in the arena again. Above the arena, the Shura spring water was boiling, and a stream of Shura spring water flew towards him, merging into his body. With a rough look, there were no less than 100,000 drops of Shura spring water. In an instant, Yi Chen's life mark had been repaired, and it had become much deeper. His power had improved further, reaching a realm that even he himself was not too sure about. The biggest change was still his body. He had grown from 48 meters to 15 meters in an instant. It should be known that the height of a supreme being would be harder to grow as one progressed. Moreover, 48 meters and 15 meters were two completely different levels. One was the foundation of a powerful supreme being, and the other was the foundation of a super supreme being. Of course, this did not mean that Yi Chen's power was that of a super supreme being. The foundation was just the foundation, and it was only a part of one's power. It was not the whole of one's power. In terms of martial arts, he was weaker than most of the ordinary supreme beings, and he still needed a long time to perfect his supreme martial arts. A supreme being is indeed a supreme being. Without relying on the netherworld sacred eye, just his eyesight alone, Yi Chen could see through the surface spacetime and see the layers of folded spacetime. Everything seemed transparent in his eyes, turning into pure dots, lines, and surfaces. Outside the bronze gate, not only did the number of people not decrease, it actually increased. Everyone wanted to see who would be the final victor. Would it be the celestial demonic emperor, the evil sword emperor, the martial emperor, or even Yi Chen? Most people believed that it would be the celestial demonic emperor and the evil sword emperor. Most people believed that it would be the martial emperor. The martial emperor was a bit older, and although he was first on the quasi-venerable list, his potential was much lower. As for Yi Chen, very few people believed that he would be able to walk out. It wasn't that they doubted his potential and talent, but that Yi Chen's cultivation time was too short compared to the other three. No matter how great his talent and potential were, he would still need some time to increase his strength. It was impossible to achieve it in one go. The number of Supreme Being projections outside the Bronze Gate increased from more than 20 to more than 30, and 5 of them were from the Spirit Clan. Listen, if the last one to come out, protect him with all your strength. If it's the Evil Sword Emperor, just ignore him. If it's the Martial Emperor and that rising genius, kill them for me. Kill them as soon as possible. Otherwise, the human clan will have another Supreme Being with infinite potential, and there will be endless troubles in the future. The Celestial Demonic Venerable transmitted his voice to the Supreme Being projections of the demons. Don't worry, we're all prepared. A Supreme Being projection of the demons replied. On the human clan's side, the true martial Supreme Being was also giving the same orders. He's coming out. At this moment, everyone saw a black dot fly out from the Bronze Gate. The black dot was getting bigger and bigger. Pop, it appeared. It wasn't the Celestial Demonic Emperor, nor the Evil Sword Emperor, nor the Martial Emperor, but the one who was the least favored, Yi Chen. What was even more shocking was that Yi Chen's height was actually 15 zhang. They could see that 15 zhang was the most natural height, and it wasn't a deliberate increase. He has become a Supreme Being. Everyone's jaws dropped and their eyes widened. Kill. Dozens of Supreme Being projections of the demons, the Evil Spirit Clan, and the Green Man Clan attacked Yi Chen. However, the Supreme Being projections of the Human Clan, the Giant Clan, and the Barbarian race weren't slow either, and they quickly intercepted them. Unfortunately, there was one more Supreme Being projection on the demon's side. He didn't stop them, and he instantly arrived in front of Yi Chen. You want to kill me with just a projection? Yi Chen's Sky Dream Sword had already been destroyed. He raised his sword finger and stabbed out. Chapter 1291. Pa. A pitch-black hole appeared in the space-time. Yi Chen and the Supreme Demon's projection each took a dozen steps back. What? The Supreme Demon's projection was blocked. That's way too sick. He just became a supremacy, and he already has such battle power. The projection had about 1/10 of a supremacy's battle power, and a new supremacy couldn't cultivate a supreme martial art to great completion at the moment of promotion. Therefore, no matter how heaven-defying he was, he couldn't defeat an ordinary supremacy, not even 1/100th of an ordinary supremacy. Of course, this was only the moment of promotion. If he had enough time to increase his strength, everything would be different. However, in everyone's eyes, Yi Chen was obviously different. He had just become a supremacy, and he had already displayed such powerful strength. He actually blocked it. Supreme Demon River's face was full of disbelief. Apart from supremacy, those below the supremacy level couldn't see the status of a supremacy's projection. Supreme Demon River wasn't an ordinary supremacy, but a powerful supremacy. Even if he only had 1/10 of his strength, he was still many times stronger than an ordinary supremacy. And Yi Chen was just a new supremacy, but he could actually block an attack with 80% of his strength. 15 zhang tall, but there's no reason. After the shock, a suspicious look flashed through Demon River's face. Yi Chen's height was indeed shocking. 15 meters was the height of a super supreme warrior. But he was clear that it was only because of the foundation, which was only a small part of one's power. The true embodiment of a supreme warrior's power was the domain, the martial will, and the supreme martial arts. Among them, the supreme martial arts were the most important. Only Yi Chen himself knew that apart from supreme martial arts, he wasn't weaker than a powerful supremacy in any other aspect. His sword domain had reached the peak of the 8th level, and his 2 supreme sword intents were both at the intermediate stage of the 8th level, which was equivalent to the ordinary sword intent of the intermediate stage of the 9th level. His cultivation technique was also a supremacy cultivation technique, and his sword energy was even stronger than a powerful supremacy. Demon River, what's wrong with you? You can't even deal with a new supremacy. A female supremacy's projection of the demons said with dissatisfaction, while fighting with the human supremacy's projection. Supreme Demon River's face darkened. I was too careless just now. Brat die. The Devil River Sovereign lunged at Yi Chen once again. This time, he did not hold back and executed his ultimate move, the Devil River God's Palm. His palms turned into two roaring rivers that surged toward Yi Chen. Sword Burial Art. Among all of Yi Chen's supreme martial arts, the sword burial art was definitely the strongest. This was mainly because the space-time sword art could increase its power the most directly. As long as the time ultimacy increased, the sword burial art's power would also increase correspondingly. As for the other supreme sword arts, he still had to slowly study them. More than 200 flower petals danced in the air. In the next moment, a powerful sword chi burst forth and tore apart the demonic river palm force. That was not all. Yi Chen's sword move changed, and he performed the space-time sword technique's death slash. It seemed as though he wanted to destroy the opponent's projection in one fell swoop. Little bastard, how dare you? Supreme Demon River flew into a rage out of humiliation. He couldn't take down Yi Chen in front of so many people. He had already lost all his face. Now, he was being counterattacked by his opponent. How could he not be angry? A sound akin to a tsunami erupted as Sovereign Devil River struck out with the boundless Devil River of the Devil River God's palm. The might of his palm was boundless and endless. Swish! The death slash and the boundless Demon River collided. A miraculous scene occurred. With the two of them as the center, countless 3D cubes were blasted away. They were like transparent building blocks that had been piled up for a long time being struck by an external force. These 3D cubes had the power of space-time on the outside, while the power of the palm was like water on the inside. However, Supreme Demon River was not someone to be trifled with. The boundless Demon River God's death slash was boundlessly powerful. Yi Chen's death slash had the upper hand in the beginning, but as time went on, it gradually lost its strength and was engulfed by the boundless Demon River. As expected of a veteran Supreme Demon, Yi Chen's expression did not change. He executed extreme prosperity decline to protect himself. Pung pung pung. The boundless Demon River God's death slash bombarded the multicolored sphere again and again. However, those with discerning eyes could see that Yi Chen's defensive sword art was extremely miraculous. The moment the palm force came into contact with it, it would immediately disperse and weaken. Powerful. The heavens have blessed our human race. Seeing that Yi Chen had blocked the attacks of Supreme Demon River's projection, the other Supreme Demon River projections were overjoyed. The human race has picked up a treasure this time. Give him 100 or 200 years, and he will definitely become one of the strongest Supreme Demons. The Supreme Demon River projections of the Giant Race and Barbarian Race were filled with envy. There were only a few Supreme Demons in each race. The stronger the Supreme Demons were, the greater the potential of the race's high-end combat power. After all, the stronger Supreme Demons had the chance to become a Supreme Demon. If there were not a lot of them, then there would definitely be a shortage of Supreme Demons in the future. Damn it. Why is this kid the only one who came out alive? The most depressed ones were the demons. They had thought that the final victor would be the Sky Devil Emperor and the Evil Sword Emperor. With the relationship between the two of them, they would not kill each other. It would be a good thing no matter who came out. However, it was not the two of them. Instead, it was an overly young genius of the human race. The Evil Sword Emperor is a peerless genius of our evil spirit race. His death will be a great loss. What's wrong with Supreme Demon River? Why can't he do anything to him? The evil spirit race's supreme demons were also furious. Supreme Demon River did not believe it, and attacked Yi Chen crazily. However, Yi Chen had already matured. In terms of strength, he was only slightly weaker than Supreme Demon River's projection. No matter how hard Supreme Demon River tried, He could not do anything to him. Demon River, sacrifice this projection and kill him quickly. At this moment, a voice entered Supreme Demon River's ears. Supreme Demon River shuddered. It was the Sky Devil Sovereign's voice. All right. Supreme Demon River nodded and stared at Yi Chun with killing intent. Little bastard, you don't have any chance. Die. Supreme Demon River's energy surged, and his demonic energy circulated 10 times faster than his limit. There was a limit to the projection's endurance. This was also why the projection's strength was only 1/10 of the original. Once it exceeded this limit, the projection would collapse, and the original body would also be injured. However, Supreme Demon River could not care so much. Since the Sky Devil Sovereign had spoken, he had to listen. Danger! How could Yi Chun not see that Supreme Demon River's projection wanted to sacrifice this projection to kill him? He immediately fled into the distance. Where are you going? Supreme Demon River quickly chased after him. His speed became faster and faster. With the Netherworld Sacred Eye opened, Yi Chun's control over spacetime was close to the limit. Originally, his time profound was only at 60%. Now with the Netherworld Sacred Eye, it was close to 80%. The 5 elements Dao fruit on his head also increased Yi Chun's strength by several times. Like a shooting star, Yi Chun passed through layer after layer of spacetime. Supreme Demon River's projection was like maggots attached to bones, chasing after him. Rumble! In the depths of spacetime, a huge explosion rang out. Boundless spacetime storms spread out, creating waves of ripples. Some stars that encountered the ripples immediately turned into dust. Chapter 1292. Did he succeed? The Sky Demon Sovereign's projection shook off Supreme True Marshal's projection with a palm strike, and looked at the place where Yi Chun and Supreme Demon River's projection had disappeared. However, the space-time storms were coming one after another, making it impossible to see clearly. Even with the Sky Demon Sovereign's projection's eyesight, he could only vaguely see a figure standing there. I hope he'll be fine. Supreme True Marshal's projection also looked in that direction. The space-time storm gradually dispersed, and the Supreme Marshal's projections saw clearly that the one who survived was Yi Chun. Good fella. Supreme Demon River sacrificed a projection, and still couldn't kill him. He's definitely a powerful Supreme. Humph, the demons should give up this time. Even if they don't want to give up, they have to. Everyone here is a projection. Once Supreme Demon River's projection is destroyed, the demons won't be able to deal with this kid. The Supreme Marshal's projections of the Human Race Alliance discussed. That was close. Yi Chun still had a lingering fear in his heart. Once Devil River's projection went all out, his strength would increase by 100-fold, and he would be 1,000 times more powerful than him. Fortunately, at the crucial moment, he relied on the advantage of his space-time profound to avoid the direct attack range of Devil River. Swoosh! Yi Chun flew towards the Bronze Gate and intentionally avoided the Supreme Marshal's projection. Sky Demon Venerable's projection's face was gloomy. If my real body was here, with the Sky Demon Sacred Armor and Bloodthirst Spear, I could kill this kid without any defense. With the Sky Demon Sacred Armor, Supreme True Marshal couldn't hurt him. He could take a few attacks and kill Yi Chun. But now, he was just a projection and could easily collapse. Forget it. A powerful Supreme won't affect the overall situation. Sky Demon Venerable's projection ordered a retreat. Let's go back first. Seeing the demons and the other Supreme projections leave, Supreme True Marshal's projection heaved a sigh of relief and ordered them to return to the human race's territory. It was too dangerous here. He looked at Yi Chun and said with a smile, Yi Chun, come with us to the 9-turn star. The 9 Revolutions star was the largest 9th-level life star in the 4 major life star regions. The high-level figures of the human race had established their headquarters there, and under normal circumstances, even sovereigns would stay on the 9 Revolutions star for many years. Of course, every sovereign would have their own continent to live on. The 9 Revolutions star had a total of 81 continents, some large and some small. There's no rush. I will go to the 9 Revolutions star in a week. Yi Chun still had to take care of other matters. After becoming a supreme being, he needed a large amount of time to consolidate his cultivation and cultivate his martial arts. Therefore, he had to make a trip back first. Alright, let's meet on the 9 Revolutions star. As a fellow sovereign, Supreme True Marshal naturally had to respect Yi Chen's decision. Waiting until the sovereign's projections left, Yi Chen waved his hand. Su Jing, Morong Qingcheng, and the rest felt the space-time warp. Before long, they arrived on the flame star. So fast, the golden-robed emperor clicked his tongue. Although the human race's territory was relatively close to the spirit race's territory, it was still several tens of thousands of light years away. Yi Chen, you've truly become a sovereign? Morong Qingcheng raised her head and looked at Yi Chen, feeling like she was dreaming. She knew how difficult it was to become a sovereign. It was thousands of times harder than breaking through from Sea of Soul realm to Life and Death realm. Yi Chen faintly smiled and nodded. At the same time, his body began to shrink to the height of an ordinary human. The war between the human race and the demons is imminent. For a long time, I might have to cultivate on the 9 Revolutions star. If you need anything, you can find me there. Yi Chen said to everyone. Of course. I haven't been to the 9 Revolutions star yet. If I say your name, I should be able to get in without any obstruction. Up until the time they separated, the golden-robed emperor and the rest of Duguju's group were still in shock. In merely 600 years, Yi Chen had become a sovereign. This was an absolutely world-shaking achievement. Not to mention them, even if some of the ancient geniuses were to be revived, they wouldn't be able to compare to Yi Chen. He was simply a monster among monsters. In the next few days, Yi Chen reunited with his family. As his cultivation base increased, the time he spent with his family became less and less. Fortunately, the people closest to him had all become life and death kings with a lifespan of 100,000 years. Thus, Yi Chen didn't have to worry about not having a chance to reunite with them in the future. A week later, Yi Chen left. Before leaving, he planted a sword seed in the souls of his family, disciple and girlfriend. This sword seed contained the might of a sovereign, but its weakness was that it consumed a lot of yuan qi. Yi Chen couldn't give too many sword seeds at once. The consumption was too great. The White Tiger Star was close to the center of the 4 great life star fields. There was a colossal life star with a diameter of 1.5 billion li observing from afar. One could see that this star's terrain was in the shape of an ocean, precisely 9 circles around it. This star was precisely the 9 Revolution star. In Supreme Pavilion, be it humans or beasts, all the sovereigns had arrived. This was because today was the day of the new sovereign, Yi Chen's arrival. Facing such a young sovereign, everyone had to give him some face. True Marshal Supreme had also secretly communicated with the other sovereigns, telling them to maintain a good relationship with Yi Chen. Yi Chen, welcome to the 9 Revolution star. True Marshal Supreme led the group to greet him. Yi Chen cupped his fists. Everyone is too polite. Yi Chen has just arrived. If there's anything I've done wrong, don't hesitate to tell me. Yi Chen will correct his mistakes. Supreme Langya smiled. Before you became a sovereign, Qinxin and I were the youngest sovereigns. Now that you've appeared, you've broken our record. Let's exchange some pointers in the future. Langya is right. Supreme Qinxin was also very curious about Yi Chen. It was rare to see such a young sovereign. She might be able to learn something from him. She didn't think that the longer one cultivated, the more qualified they were. As the saying goes, the more capable one is the teacher. In terms of cultivation speed, Yi Chen had left them in the dust. Since ancient times, they had learned that the young were the ones to be feared. Definitely, Yi Chen also wanted to learn something from him. For example, some secrets that those below the sovereign realm didn't know. The universe was too big. No one dared to say that they were omniscient. Yi Chen, you probably don't know me, but I've seen you on the Green Dragon Star. The one who spoke was a muscular middle-aged man with a bronze crown on his head. You're the sovereign of the dragon race? Yi Chen could feel the boundless dragon power in his body. Supreme Langya introduced. This is the bronze sovereign of the dragon race. He's one of the strongest sovereigns in the human race. The bronze sovereign was the strongest sovereign apart from the supreme sovereigns. The dragon race had an even stronger sovereign, the Golden Sovereign. The Golden Sovereign was a supreme sovereign. Unfortunately, he had been missing for many years. No one knew where he went. Yichen wasn't surprised that the Bronze Sovereign knew about him. He had been to the Green Dragon Star many times, so he must have noticed him. Next, Yichen got to know all the sovereigns. Every single one of them was amazed by Yichen's youth. It was also the first time Yichen knew that the ultimate strength of the human race was powerful. On the other hand, the ultimate strength of the demons was terrifying. Chapter 1293. Langya, take Yichen to choose a continent. After Yichen had talked with almost all the other Supremes, Supreme True Marshal instructed Langya. Alright Yichen, follow me. Supreme Langya nodded and looked at Yichen. Yichen followed behind Supreme Langya. In the sky above the 9 Revolution Star, Supreme Langya said while leading the way. The 9 Revolution Star has 81 continents. Some of them are public, and the rest can be chosen at will. Of course, one must choose the ownerless ones. Currently, there are 24 ownerless continents on the 9 Revolution Star. Wind Forest Continent, Fire Rock Continent, Sky Chin Continent. Each continent has its own specialties. Wind Forest Continent has more forests, and its winds are also quite strong. Moreover, these are not ordinary winds, but God-destroying gales that even 8th layer life and death monarchs would have to struggle to traverse. Fire Rock Continent is a world of flames, and its rocks are all on fire. I'll choose Sky Chin Continent. The 9 Revolution Star was the largest 9th grade life star in the 4 great life star fields. It was incomparably mystical. For countless years, countless legendary supremes had laid down restrictive arrays and fortified the 9 Revolution Star. Even demigods had personally used their methods. Therefore, not only was the 9 Revolution Star's defense so strong that even supremes couldn't destroy it, it also had many limitations. For example, the range of soul power exploration was very small. Yichen relied on Netherworld Sacred Eye to see the location of Sky Chin Continent. Alright, I'll take you there. Supreme Langya continued leading the way. Not long after, the two of them arrived above the Tianqian continent. As one of the 81 continents on the 9 Revolution Star, the Tianqian continent was much larger than an ordinary life planet. There were countless small stars in the sky, as well as a relatively large sun and moon. They could light up the entire Tianqian continent. Good place. Yichen nodded. Supreme Langya said, 9 Revolution Star has 81 continents, and each continent is very mysterious. It all depends on one's preference. This is the place. That's good. There's a main palace on the Heavenly Star continent, the Heavenly Star Palace. You only need to refine the Heavenly Star Pearl in the Heavenly Star Palace, and you'll be able to control the entire Heavenly Star continent. When other supreme beings enter the Heavenly Star continent, you'll know immediately. If you don't allow them to enter, they won't be able to enter. You can't break in? Yichen was puzzled. If a traitor appeared on the 9 Revolution planet and took control of an entire continent, wouldn't it be impossible to attack? Supreme Langya laughed and explained, you don't have to worry about that. The true Marshal Supreme controls the 9 Revolution Star Hub. If there's a traitor, the true Marshal Supreme only needs to move his mind, and the continent will be defenseless. It's useless even if there's a traitor. I see. From Yichen's point of view, the 9 Revolution Star wasn't just a simple life star. It was more like a planetary artifact, and the artifact was controlled by the true Marshal Supreme. Oh, I forgot to tell you. After you become a supreme being, you'll automatically have a level 8 life star. You can bring your friends and family there. Us supreme beings have a lifespan of over 100,000 years. After that, your children and grandchildren will be terrifying as well. Supreme Langya said, the human race didn't have many level 9 life stars. The dragon race had 1, the phoenix race had 1, and the monster race had 1. The human race only had a few, no more than 10, and they all had their own uses. There were many level 8 life stars, enough to satisfy all the supreme beings. That's for the best. Yichen was quite satisfied with obtaining a level 8 life star. Although he didn't have any children yet, the entire Yi family and Falling Dust Sword sect had a lot of people. After hundreds of years of reproduction, their numbers had multiplied by several times. After 100,000 years, his descendants might be in the millions. After all, not all of them were talented, and not all of them put their minds into bitter cultivation. With the backing of Yi Chun and Yi family, even more of them would put their minds into enjoying themselves. Yi Chun couldn't do anything about this. Resources were limited. It was fine to nurture a few 100,000 people, but to nurture tens of thousands, or even hundreds of millions, the entire human race didn't have enough resources. They could only drift with the tide. At present, Yi Chun already had a 3rd-grade life star, Flaming Fire Star, and a 4th-grade life star, Blue Fire Star. The latter was bestowed to him after he became an 8th-layer life and death sovereign. These 2 life stars would be useful in the future, allowing him to send some of his family members out and nurture their independence. Alright, I've told you everything I need to. You've just become a sovereign, so you should need some time to cultivate martial skills and increase your strength. I won't disturb you any longer. If you need anything, you can summon True Martial Supreme or other sovereigns from the Supreme Pavilion. Supreme Langya continued. As for your 8th-grade life star, there are people below to prepare it for you. You don't need to worry about it. I'll be troubling you then. Yi Chun indeed wanted to cultivate martial skills. After becoming a sovereign, his mind was constantly flickering with inspiration. After Supreme Langya left, Yi Chun flew to the center of Heavenly Star Continent and entered the Heavenly Star Palace. Inside, a pearl flickering with resplendent starlight floated. With a wave of his hand, the pearl flew into Yi Chun's hand, and he began refining it. No wonder the 9 Revolution Star isn't suitable for humans to live in. Heavenly Star Continent is full of dangers for those below the sovereign realm. Only the Heavenly Star Palace is safe. The entire 9 Revolution Star has been refined into a planet-grade artifact by countless legendary sovereigns and demigods since ancient times. Its might is boundless. While refining the pearl, Yi Chun gradually understood the mysteries of the 9 Revolution Star. However, if I bestow a trace of the pearl's power, I can stay on Heavenly Star Continent for a long time. In a short while, Yi Chun had completely refined the pearl. In the following days, Yi Chun immersed himself in sword arts. The current him was still lacking in many areas, the biggest of which was naturally sword arts. Cultivation knew no time. While Yi Chun was cultivating, rumors about him spread throughout the universe. At that time, there were too many 8th-layer life and death sovereigns of all races present. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100, and 100 spread to 1,000. In a short year, the news of Yi Chun becoming a sovereign had reached the ears of most life and death kings. Everyone was astonished by Yi Chun's talent. It should be known that Yi Chun was only 600 years old, and the youngsters who became sovereigns within 1,000 years had a common title, 1,000-year sovereign. 1,000-year sovereigns had a high chance of becoming legendary sovereigns, and perhaps even demigods. In fact, in terms of cultivation talent, Yi Chun's talent was even better than many legendary sovereigns. However, nobody knew the future, and they could only say that there was hope. At the same time, the demons and the other demonic races started to calm down after suffering a grievance. However, the aura of war did not calm down. Instead, it was hidden even deeper. A storm was brewing. Chapter 1294. Tianshan Continent. On a boundless lake, a figure sat cross-legged on the surface of the water, motionless, drifting with the flow. After a long time, Yi Chun opened his eyes, stood up, and started to perform the 5-element sword art. The 5-element sword art was the most fundamental supreme sword art of Yi Chun, the essence of the extreme prosperity decline, boundless nature, and 5-element slash. The stronger the 5-element sword art was, the stronger the extreme prosperity decline, boundless nature, and 5-element slash would naturally become stronger. This was much more efficient than cultivating one by one. Of course, it was also much more difficult. No, I'm still lacking a bit. Shaking his head, Yi Chun continued to sit cross-legged, and pondered the deeper essence of the five-element sword art. Day after day, month after month, year after year, in the blink of an eye, it had been 12 years since Yi Chen came to the 9 Revolution Star. In these 12 years, Yi Chen's five-element sword art grew stronger every day, even gradually surpassing the sword burial art. After all, the sword burial art only contained 70% time profound, while Yi Chen's five elements profound had long reached perfection. It was just that his comprehension wasn't at the level of a sovereign, so he couldn't perfect the five-element sword art. Now that he had become a sovereign, his comprehension had increased countless times, and he also had the essence of the 3 realms supreme's martial arts. If he didn't improve quickly, it would seem like he was stupid. While improving the five-element sword art, Yi Chen didn't give up on the death slice and the sword burial art. Yi Chen already had more than 300 petals, catching up to supreme flower burial. Of course, although Yi Chen's foundation was much stronger than supreme flower burial, the sword burial art was created by supreme flower burial. Some of the essences that had nothing to do with time and space profound weren't grasped by Yi Chen yet. Therefore, Yi Chen couldn't make the sword burial art his main sword art. The five-element sword art was his foundation. Perhaps in the future, he would change the sword burial art again, turning it into a sword burial art that truly belonged to him. The 15th year. On this day above the lake, Yi Chen's eyes flashed with unprecedented brilliance. In an instant, it was brighter than the sun and moon in the sky, more dazzling. Wrong. It turns out that I was wrong before. The 5 elements are responsible for creation. The heaven and earth are divided into yin and yang give birth to the 5 elements. I used the destruction sword intent to perform the 5 elements sword art, but it didn't match the 5 elements sword art at all. Using the immortal sword intent to perform the 5 elements sword art, although it wasn't domineering enough, it could perfectly perform the 5 elements sword art and stimulate the power of creation, which was far more powerful than the destruction sword intent. After a moment of enlightenment, Yi Chen's eyes were filled with joy. In the past, any sword art he performed contained the destructive sword intent, and the immortal sword intent was usually used to protect his body. He would only use the immortal sword intent when he performed the 5 elements sword art. That was why the defense of the extreme prosperity sword art was so powerful. Unfortunately, the extreme prosperity sword art was just a side branch of the 5 elements sword art. How could it compare to the vastness and profoundness of the 5 elements sword art? For example, the extreme prosperity sword art was a weapon, while the 5 elements sword art was the human body. No matter how powerful the weapon was, it could never be as powerful as the human body. This is the real 5 elements sword art. Moving his body, Yi Chen performed the 5 elements sword art. This time, the 5 elements sword art was less domineering, but more profound. Rumble. On the boundless lake, a piece of land was being born rapidly. Inside the land, all kinds of metals were being brewed, forming into a ball. On the land, a river was born. With the river as the center, patches of green appeared. Flowers and trees grew crazily. With the appearance of flowers and trees, the nutrients of the land were being extracted, and the ground started to heat up. Magma appeared, and then volcanoes erupted, and flames burned the sky. All of this was the sword momentum, the materialized 5 elements sword art. Enemies who were in the range of the sword momentum would feel powerless, as if they were fighting against the heaven and the earth. Yi Chen could continue attacking, or he could leave at any time. My 5 elements sword art, even though I haven't fully displayed the ultimate essence of the 5 elements profound, it is still my highest achievement. It's a pity that I don't have an opponent to exchange pointers with. Yi Chen was clear that only by exchanging pointers could he find out where he was lacking. In the blink of an eye, another 3 years passed. Under Yi Chen's study, the 5 elements sword art had become increasingly profound. Towards the end, even he himself couldn't find any flaws. My horizons are limited. Training in seclusion alone is useless. Shaking his head, Yi Chen looked up at the sky. His figure flickered, and he instantly arrived in the sky above Sky Star Continent. In the next moment, Yi Chen rushed toward Supreme Pavilion. Supreme Pavilion. Many people came and went, and Supremes would come here from time to time. Of course, there were also some high-ranking members of the human race. Their cultivation bases were all at the 8th layer of life and death realm. Greeting the passing Supremes, Yichen arrived at the 9th floor of Supreme Pavilion. This was where the supreme weapons of the human race were stored. Newly ascended Supremes could obtain a set of supreme weapons for free. If they were damaged, they would have to make enough contributions to get them again. One could exchange for treasures, or they could do some big things for the human race. Apart from supreme weapons, there were also some supreme materials on the 9th floor. I'll choose a supreme armor first. Yichen walked toward the supreme armor treasury. Supreme Yi, you're here to choose a supreme weapon, right? I'm Sima Jingwan, the manager of Supreme Pavilion. There was someone working on the 9th floor of Supreme Pavilion. It was a beautiful woman. Upon seeing Yichen, her eyes brightened. Although she had never seen Yichen before, it didn't hinder her from seeing Yichen's image. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't curious about such a young and newly ascended Supremes. Of course, she was even more in awe. Yichen nodded. Can I go in? Of course, of course. This way, please. Sima Jingwan promptly nodded and stepped aside. When Yichen entered the treasury, Sima Jingwan couldn't help but whisper, he's really too young. So young, yet he's already a pillar of the human race. I wonder how he cultivates. The Supreme Armor Treasury was a completely different world. There were a large number of supreme armors stored inside. With a rough look, there were no less than 50 or 60 of them. Some were already very broken, while some were still very new. White Tiger Armor, 7-Star Annihilation Armor, Sun Moon Armor, Milky Way Armor. Yichen walked past the supreme armors and memorized all the information about them in his mind. After walking one round, Yichen pondered for a moment and came to the side of a golden armor. This supreme armor was called the Wind Cloud Armor. Wearing this armor could increase one's defense by more than 100 times, and could also absorb a large amount of attack power. It turns out that it's so difficult for a supreme being to kill a supreme being. For example, a powerful supreme being could kill a normal supreme being, or a super supreme being could kill a powerful supreme being. It's too difficult to kill a supreme being at the same level. The supreme armor can completely block more than 90% of the attack power. I wonder how terrifying the divine armor above the supreme armor is. Yichen's thoughts were quick. He thought of supreme being from the supreme armor. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.